Good evening, everybody, and welcome to BK 141, week 4 already. How exciting. We're going to be going over macarons tonight, but of course, we're going to be recapping week 3. Couple things that I just want to go over before we get into all the good stuff. Again, your assignment. Submissions this week were a little low. I'm a little concerned. I want to make sure that you guys are staying on top of your work, communicating with me whenever you're unable to get an assignment in, and just letting me know what's going on just so that I can keep up and make sure that it's not that you're, having questions or something that I can help you with. So just make sure you're staying in contact. Make sure that you are doing your best to keep up each week, getting those assignments turned in on time. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. Next thing, I emailed everybody today. Let's go ahead and show you. I have your ingredients list posted. Hold on, let me switch roles so that you guys can see it the way that you see it, all the way at the bottom under frozen desserts. Make sure you guys' mics are muted so we don't get any background noise, please and thank you. I have your ingredients list for BK 121. That will be your next class. We want to make sure that you're able to go ahead and get going on getting all these types of ingredients. It's cake class, it's your patisserie class. So you're gonna need a lot of sugar, eggs, butter, all that good stuff. So check that out. It's on the bottom of the class page. It's also in class announcements. All the equipment you need, all the ingredients you need are listed in there. That way you can go ahead and get a head start on that. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about week 3. How was truffle week? Does anybody want to chit chat, talk about their truffles? Well, let's see. Who feels like they had a better tempering experience this week? Who wants to talk about kind of that progression from week 1 to week 2? Go ahead, Emma.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, well.
But mine's come out pretty good. I'm just waiting. It had to set longer than what I anticipated. Because I used the white chocolate, and even though I used the 3:1 ratio,
yes,
still to get it more firm to work with it. So I used the piping. I piped it. That's the reason I haven't submitted it yet. But yeah, it has to firm up a little more.
Yeah, sometimes it can take a little bit longer than kind of that like 1 to 2 hours, especially if you are working with the white chocolate. It does take a little bit longer. So just be patient with it. Just leave it be. Just stick it in the fridge. Come back to it in a few hours' time.
Okay.
You could even leave it in the fridge overnight and then finish it up tomorrow. That's fine as well.
I normally do it at a dark chocolate. So this is the first time this is experience to do it in the white. So yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm glad to see that you're trying new things.
Yes.
Good. And I see that Jessie said she loved it. Let's see, Terilyn, it was a little bit hard finding the heavy cream, so you used milk, the lactate milk. Did you use whole milk or did you use a lower fat? 2%. Okay, so it does have a little bit of a lower fat content. Also, the lactate, of course, is missing the lactose. It does kind of change the DNA of the milk a little bit, but because it's not as thick, it's not as fatty as your heavy cream is. Obviously, it's going to set differently. It's going to be more like similar to, excuse me, like a water ganache that doesn't have the fat in there. It can be a little bit difficult to set up. If you can't find the heavy cream, yeah, I was going to try to do it with the whole milk, but even still, it is going to set up a little bit softer than your heavy cream would. But definitely whole milk is you're going to have a better time with that than the 2%.
Yeah, that's another thing I use too, the whole milk instead of heavy cream. That might have been a thing too.
Yeah, the whole milk, it's gonna have a softer set than your heavy creams. Or if you're doing
Yeah,
vegan, then coconut milk would be a good option because it's high in
I
fat.
got you.
And then if you use
Yeah.
like a really dark chocolate, that would make it a vegan truffle. You want to make sure your chocolate has no milk solids in there, and then use the coconut milk, and you'll have a vegan option. So that's something to think about. Trinice, tempering was easier this time, different thermometer. Your thermometer is so important to tempering because, yes, other factors play a role, but a huge part of tempering, the main part, is the temperatures. So when your chocolate is tempered properly, it's going to hit these very specific temperatures. But that's not to say that if the chocolate is in those temperatures that it is tempered. I think I talked to a couple of you guys about that. I know, like, for a second, it's a little hard to wrap your head around that, but time and agitation, all of those things, your environment, climate, all that plays a role in tempering. So just because it's hit, 84 degrees, it doesn't mean that it's been tempered properly. But if it is tempered properly, it will hit that 84 degrees. So if that makes a little bit of sense. Milk chocolate ganache was softer than the white chocolate. Interesting. It's usually going to be your white chocolate that is the softest. Remind me, what ratio was your milk chocolate ganache?
2-to-1.
2-to-1. Okay, try a 2.5. Milk chocolate, sometimes that 2-to-1 is still a little bit not enough. Like, obviously it makes a delicious ganache. It's fantastic. It sets up. But as far as going into roll it and cut it, if you kick it up just that little bit more to that 2.5, sometimes that can help as well.
Okay, yeah, I did one that had just espresso powder in it, in the cream, and then I also, at another batch, I added the toffee bits to it.
I remember those ones.
The toffee bit ganache set up really well. It was the espresso one with just the espresso cream was very soft.
Okay,
I mean,
I got you.
rollable, and it was still I could still cut it, but it was softer than both the white chocolate one and the one that had the toffee bits in it.
I gotcha. Yeah. When you start adding things into the ganache, sometimes it will adjust, like it will change the set of it, the firmness of it, especially liquor. If you notice that you added any alcohol to it, it will be a little bit of a softer set than if you don't have it, because that alcohol is going to start to kind of denature and break down the products in there. And so you'll notice that it will be a little bit of a softer set if you start adding kind of a lot of liquor to it. So kind of just generally what I'm seeing in the chat is just kind of setting, like the setting of the ganache was tricky. Set it in the fridge and be sure that you're giving it enough time to set. I know that it does say, 1 to 2 hours, but if you take a look at it and it needs longer, leave it longer, stick it in the fridge, allow it to set in the fridge so that it gets really firm. Pull it out and work with it. You don't want to work with it if it's like really hard and really solid, but working with it from the fridge, if it's firm but still pliable, that's very helpful as well. I know that this time of year, a lot of you guys are still experiencing cooler weather, but like myself down in Florida, it's pretty warm here already. And it's already getting humid. It's already kicking into all the rain and everything. So that's going to play a role with the set of my chocolate as well. So there's a lot of factors with chocolate, and that's why people can sometimes get frustrated with it. But if you're working with it professionally, you will be in a temperature and humidity controlled room. So all of these things that we might experience, like with our home kitchens, it is a little bit more controlled, like in that, chocolate shop. So that does take a little bit of the stress off. I mean, when I was looking through, obviously I'm still grading them, but as I've been looking through there, I'm seeing the change, or like the progression in your tempering from week 1 to week 2. And it's phenomenal. Like if there was maybe a little bit of bloom last week, I'm not seeing that this week. Or if the chocolate was set maybe like a little too soft last week, I'm noticing that this week it's setting much more firm. You've got those 3 S's of tempering: your strength, snap, and shine. I'm definitely seeing that a lot more this week. So that makes my heart happy. So excellent job, guys. And like I said, if you have not submitted thus far, just make sure that you get that into me. I will definitely keep that open through the rest of the week. That way I can have a look at those as the week goes on. So if there wasn't anything else about tempering chocolate and ganache and truffles and all that fun stuff. Are we ready to talk about macarons this week? All right. Yes, I see in the chat. Fantastic. So kind of before class started, we were talking a little bit about what like the energy that macarons have taken on because of social media and TV and lots of celebrity chefs, and everybody is like talking about the macaron and, oh man, this thing is hard, it's difficult. It is finicky. Yes, it is, because we're working with meringue. Meringue is finicky, but I know that with some patience and some time, you guys are going to get these down. And once you start understanding your oven, your environment, your kitchen, it goes a lot more smoothly each and every time you learn something else. Macarons is like when you kind of delve into that rabbit hole, I like to call it, you each and every time that you make a batch, keep a notebook, start taking your notes, keep track of what you did this time so that you can change it next time. And I mean, you guys are gonna get like hooked. It's really addictive. But let's go ahead. I have want to pull this up, share my screen real quick for you guys. That way we know what we're going to discuss today. So we are in week 4, macaron. Discussion points, we've already gone over the week 2 recap, but I kind of just wanted to talk a little bit about the history of this cookie. So, maybe not everybody knows, kind of how far back it comes from, but it's actually been an evolution of a treat. So it started out kind of back in Italy. It was called a macaroni. And at that point, it was really just like ground nuts kind of bound together with, with these egg whites, much like what we know as a macaroon, like a coconut macaroon today. That's kind of, it's all the same thing really, but of course it's bigger chunks, and now we're working with that flour. So it started there, and from there it kind of progressed to Catherine de' Medici. She was an Italian kind of noble woman. She wasn't royalty or anything, but she did end up marrying into the French family. So she took these cookies over to France, and in the court, actually rewind, because before that there was a group of nuns, and the nuns got their hands on this Italian dessert. They turned it into more of a fine ground cookie, and it was just the disc at that point. It was not a sandwich. So that was that, and then that's when Catherine Medici then took that cookie over to France and introduced it to the French court. And then that's when it began to kind of take on like its own thing. It started getting fancier. It was served at all of these fancy parties, and it was just the thing to eat. It showed that you were rich, you had money, you were the bee's knees. So from there, it kind of progressed to the grandson, or I think it was the great-grandson actually. Yeah, the great-grandson is where you start to see the sandwiches. So Pierre de Fontaine, his great-grandfather, Ladurée. Has anybody heard of the Ladurée bakery over in France? Anybody associate that with macarons? Or heard the name before? Well, that is the great-grandfather of this guy who said, you know what, let's go ahead and take these sandwiches, make a filling, put them together, and that's what we know now to be the macaron. So it progressed from then all the way up to these little sandwich cookies that everybody loves and holds dear to their heart. And National Macaron Day, not National, World Macaron Day is March 20th. So last class, you guys missed it, but last class we had Macaron Week on Macaron Week was like on the week of the Macaron Day, and it was just the coolest thing ever. I was so excited about it. But yeah, March 20th is Macaron Day. So that's just a little bit about the history. Like I said, I like history. I think it's cool. I might not know everything, but it's very interesting to me. There's so much more to like pastry and culinary arts and everything than just the food, kind of like submerge yourself in the entire industry, everything about it. I think that when you start to get into this world, to be, kind of well-rounded and well-versed and know about everything just besides just the cooking itself. You know, that definitely it's kind of a sign that like this is where you belong when everything consumes you about it. But anywho, so a little bit about the egg white. So of course this is a meringue-based cookie. Now, a meringue. Who's worked with meringues before? I know everybody's worked with meringues. Yes, I have, chef. All right, so a meringue is protein, right? Egg whites are 90% water, but it's the proteins. That's the molecules in there. That's kind of what's trapping the air. So the way that the meringue works, or the way that the whipped egg whites work, is as you are whipping your egg whites, you're incorporating the air into those egg whites. Now, egg whites on its own, once you incorporate that air, it will fall. So you need some type of stabilizers. This is where sugar comes in, and this is where acid comes in. So what these two things do is kind of slow down the denaturing process, and it allows more air to get incorporated into your meringue so that you get a lighter and fluffier product. You want to wait until your meringue is light and fluffy before you start to add in your sugar, just so that it doesn't weigh it down. You don't want it to be too heavy, so you kind of allow some foam to build, and then that's when you come in with your sugar. The other thing that you'll see oftentimes to stabilize your meringue is acid. So this acid, what it does is it kind of gets in there. Basically the protein molecules that are in egg whites, they're all wound up, they're all tight, they're all curly. So this acid comes in and kind of helps everything relax, helps it denature, and allows those molecules to kind of straighten out. And as you continue to whip, it stabilizes it. It allows you to incorporate more air before the egg whites begin to coagulate, which at that point, there's not really any more air that can be incorporated there. So that's why we use stabilizers. So you can use things like cream of tartar. You can use lemon juice. You can use vinegar. Either of those are fine. If you're using, take a note real quick, if you're using cream of tartar, use about a 1/4 teaspoon for this formula that we're using this week. If you're using lemon juice, I would use about a 1/2 teaspoon. So it's very important to not get any fat. You don't want any fat in your meringue, right? Because that fat is going to get in the way. It's going to coat all of those proteins. They're not going to be able to whip up properly. So if you're able to use a stainless steel bowl, that's definitely the go-to. Plastic tends to hold on to fat, so you want to kind of avoid using a plastic bowl if possible. If you can't, you're still able to have success. Just kind of wipe your bowl down with lemon juice is usually what I like to do. And your whip as well. But you want to make sure absolutely no egg yolks get into your egg whites. So however you are comfortable with cracking eggs to separate your eggs to not get any egg yolks, definitely go with that method. I don't care what method you use, whatever works for you. You can use the shells. I like the shells. I hate getting eggs all over my hands. Some people like to pop it in their pan and just let it drip through. What else? You can put them all in a bowl and scoop out the egg yolks. Has anybody done the bottle where you like squeeze the bottle and soak up the egg yolk, like pop the egg yolk out of the whites? Yeah, that's definitely a thing. So you can just squeeze it and it pulls up that egg yolk out of the egg whites. That's another way to separate them. So there's lots of ways, but whatever works for you. Just no fat in your egg whites, otherwise it will not whip up. So that is it on my egg whites, my meringue. So who can tell me what, like, at its base, what are we kind of working with this week? Yes, we're working with macaron, but kind of what does that fall under? What type of, what's the umbrella for macarons? Cookies. Yes. Pettifords, even more specific. Yay. What did Trista say? Trista said something too.
I said a Pettiford.
Yes, thank you. Awesome. So there are different types of pettifords. There are your sec, which is what the macaron is. Sec means dry. So any little cookie that's going to be like 1 to 2 bites. Your other main pettiford is going to be the glacé. Let me pull up a picture of those. That's going to be like when you think about pettifords. This is
Isn't that a layered cake with like a pork on it?
These guys, right? This is what you're thinking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so this is, when you hear Pettiford, this is what everybody thinks. Like, this is the classic, you know, this is kind of just taken on generally what Pettiford is. These little guys here has taken that on. It's a sponge cake layered with some type of jam, usually some buttercream, maybe even some marzipan on there as well. And then you cover that in a poured fondant, which, rewind back to week 1, poured fondant is kind of like the cousin of fondant, or sorry, of fudge, where you're cooking your sugar to a softball stage, allowing it to cool, and then agitating it to introduce those small crystals. And that's poured fondant or confectioner's fondant, where you can pour it over there. But there, besides the glacé, besides those little cakes, there's the sec pettiforts, which is the macaron falls under there. Pommiers would fall under that category as well. Another type of pettifort would be your fresh, or your fresh ones. So like mini eclairs, mini cream puffs. So kind of the theme of pettiforts, which means small ovens. The theme with pettiforts is very small, very bite-sized. So that this is kind of like how I got into the industry, or like what my main, what I was working with mainly, because my first job was at a resort. So, you know, you go to those kind of high-end resorts, they've got Sunday brunch, and Sunday brunch was my baby. The dessert table was my baby. I was responsible for setting up your dessert table, which was typically 7 to 10 pettiforts for everybody to enjoy. A lot of times, if there were like banquets and weddings throughout the week, we could recycle that, use that on the table, and cut them usually about 1.5 by 1.5 inches, where you use your cake wheel and you mark or you score your cake, and then you come through and you cut it into all those small pieces. You get about 150 pieces out of a full sheet, about 75 pieces out of a half sheet. And then of course, cream puffs, you know, making like hundreds and hundreds of choux pastry. So like I love this kind of stuff. I love all these little guys. Truffles will often be on your pettifort table. And then the last type of pettifort would be like all your like candy dipped fruits, dried fruits, and things of that nature. So that's the umbrella of the macaron, would be a pettifort. So if for whatever crazy reason you cannot get your hands on almond flour or almond meal, they're one and the same thing. If you're unable to find them, reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to come up with like a backup plan where you're still making a pettifort, and hopefully a dry pettifort. And but that's just case by case. I really hope that everybody is able to make the macarons, because they're a lot of fun to make and they're really cool, and it's definitely something that you should, you know, get under your belt. So has anybody kind of seen different types, like different styles or variations of the macaron, as in how it's made, like how the meringue is made? Has anybody ever taken any notice of that?
I know sometimes people use the different like flours. I know some people, depending on what flour it is, because some people use different nut flours.
Yeah, definitely. So you can make some you can make nut-free macarons with things like cornmeal, believe it or not, sunflower seeds as well. I've seen macarons made with those. I have a couple recipes if anybody is interested in making a nut-free option. Again, that's another option if you just can't find almond flour. Reach out to me and I can pass on that kind of cornmeal recipe, because cornmeal should be a little less difficult to find. But yeah, you can definitely use different nuts. Another variation that you'll see is how the meringue is made. So sometimes you'll see people make a French meringue or a common meringue, where you're whipping your egg whites, adding in the sugar. But then another version of meringue that you're going to often see with the macaron, these are the two kinds, is your Italian meringue. Does anybody have any experience making an Italian meringue? No? So Italian meringue is going to be your sugar syrup that you want to cook to softball. Keep hearing that softball, right? Softball stage comes up a lot. So you're going to cook your sugar, and then you're going to drizzle that into your egg whites while they're whipping, and it just makes the most luxurious, kind of stable, delicious meringue. People like macarons with the different types of meringue, they do yield different kind of product. I want to share my screen and kind of show you just a couple of variations, a couple differences that you'll see depending on what type of meringue is used. So with a French meringue, it's generally going to be a little less sweet than the Italian meringue, because you do need to use more sugar when making an Italian meringue than you would with a French meringue. So you'll notice that difference. The French meringue, it's more flat, meaning that as that cookie rises up and develops those feet, it's going to be a little bit flatter than an Italian meringue. You're going to get a little bit more rise. With the Italian meringue, your feet on like the little ruffle on the bottom of the macaron, that is going to stay a little bit straighter and rise a little bit higher with an Italian meringue. With French meringue, of course, there's no need to cook the sugar. So there's not that step, which can be, you know, it can be difficult with already working with something that has so many steps. Adding that extra step, you know, it can definitely have its challenges. And it's more sensitive to being over whipped. An Italian meringue is the most stable out of all the meringues. So you have that stability with the Italian meringue that you don't have with the French meringue. And then, let's see, can we use Swiss meringue? So Swiss meringue, people have made meringue with, or made macarons with Swiss, but it's generally not the go-to. Your two main ones are gonna be French and Italian. Those are usually your go-tos for macarons. French meringue, it benefits from aged egg whites, which I'll chat about in just a second. And then kind of over with the Italian meringue, they are a little bit chewier because of cooking the sugar, of creating your meringue that way. That's how you make marshmallow. So it's going to be a little bit chewier than the French meringue would be. Like I said, they stand a bit taller. You don't have to, some people say you don't have to rest them. Some people do rest them, which that's what you'll find a lot in the macaron world, is there's a lot of he said, she said. Everybody has their strange little things that, you know, that they go by with the macaron. Some of it's fact, some of it's just, you know, little twerks that we as chefs pick up as we go along. But two things that are very important with macaron is aged egg whites as well as resting time. So aged egg whites, what this means is you crack your egg whites a day in advance, and you can cover it, maybe pop a little hole in there, keep it in the fridge, that's fine. And what this does is allow your egg whites to begin to dry out, allow that moisture to start to evaporate out of there. Because when all is said and done, what your goal is when making a macaron is to dry out the cookie. So working with aged egg whites kind of gives you a jump start in making sure that your cookie is dry. Another very important thing with, you can make it without aged egg whites, please know that. But the reason behind aging them is just to kind of help that process along of starting to dry everything out. Something that is very important and that you will absolutely need to do is rest your macarons. So once you've piped them out, you want to leave them on the counter until they form a skin. So basically, if you kind of like swipe your finger on the top of the macaron, it should be dry to touch. This can take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. It depends on your environment. Is there a lot of moisture in the air? Is it humid? So all of these fun factors, again, we work with a lot of finicky things in this class. It's just that kind of class. But yeah, so there's that big window there. Of course, the how-to video is on the class page, but I want to bring up real quick a little snippet of it that shows the macronage. So that's what it's called when you're folding your dry ingredients with your egg whites. It's called macronage. And it's very, very, very important to the process. Every step is important to this process. Here's a beautiful peak. You want a very stiff peak on your egg white. You do not want it to be over whipped, which would look like, oh, nope, I deleted it. I did have a picture of over whipped egg whites, but it's gone. It'll basically look like cottage cheese. You don't want that. You want it nice and silky and very stiff. It should stand up. So here he has his egg whites in the bowl. He is going to add his dry ingredients. Those dry ingredients are powdered sugar and almond flour that have been sifted about 3 times over. You want to make sure that there's no clumps in there, no lumps. So that's been sifted a few times. That is getting added into the egg whites. He incorporates it in stages. At this stage here, you what you don't have to be so worried about like deflating, because you do want your batter to deflate. If you have too much air left in your batter at the end of this all, your macarons are going to rise like crazy and kind of like explode in the oven. So this process, what it's doing is incorporating the dry and the meringue while knocking out some of that air. So I know it's like, well, why did I incorporate this air to just turn around and knock it out? Because you're not knocking all of it out. You're just knocking enough out that you can control the rise of the cookie. So he's going to add his coloring. He did add flavor. A lot of times chefs won't add flavor. They'll just add color and the flavor will come through in the filling. But he just used a vanilla extract. So your color goes in kind of right at the end of your macronage stage. You don't want to add it all the way at the end, because then you're going to end up overworking it. If you overwork your batter, it will be runny and your macarons won't rise properly. So it's very important to add it before he gets to the point where everything's going to kind of exhale down the side of the bowl. And you'll hear him mention that, definitely shows that in the formula as well. So what your goal is that he'll show you in just a moment. See right here, as he's swiping it up the sides of the bowl, if it stays, it's not ready. You need to pass it past the spatula another time or two. If it very slowly begins to kind of exhale down the bowl, you know that it's ready to go. If it all of a sudden pours back down, it's most likely already been over whipped at that point. If you overwork your batter, there isn't really any going back from that. You can bake them off and cook them. They'll still be tasty, but they won't look exactly as you would probably like them to look. So let me see. I think he's going to go just a little bit more. I want to make sure that you guys see exactly like what you're going for. I think that's the biggest thing with macarons, is to like that visual, because this stage here can be very difficult to comprehend. Like, okay, well, a lot of people say lava like. Well, what is lava like? Who's really stood by a volcano and watched lava? I know I haven't, so I don't know. But like to watch it, to watch this and to see what he means by like that exhale, it's very helpful. So sit and watch this like 10,000 times. So see where it's nicely kind of just oozing back into the bowl. That's where you know that you're ready to go. You've hit that sweet spot. So that is when you have achieved peak macronaging. And that at that point you would put it into your pastry bag, and then you're going to go ahead and pipe them out. I want to pull up the formula real quick. Does anybody have any questions at this point before I just plow on into the formula?
After you pipe them, do you give them a tap before they set to get the air out or something?
Yes, you do. So let's go ahead and take a look at this formula real quick. So you're going to be working with a 300-degree oven. There are a couple ways you can bake. You can bake low and slow or high and fast. This is a really nice kind of medium. This 300 degrees for about, this is 11 to 13. Please know that it could take a little bit longer than that. It may be in there for like 15 to 17. Again, this is all dependent on your oven, your environment. All of these things play a role. So make sure your oven is preheated. You're going to pulse that powdered sugar and your almond meal or almond flour. Remember, they're pretty much the same thing. You're going to pulse those together, sift the mixture about 3 times, just to make sure all the lumps and everything are out. At that point is when you're going to whip your egg whites with the cream of tartar. Remember, about a 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar, or a 1/2 teaspoon of lemon juice would be fine in there. And then you're going to allow that to get to a foamy stage. And once that foamy stage starts, that's when you're going to start incorporating your sugar a little bit at a time. Keep it on about a medium high until you get to soft peaks. If you go full on high speed, you're not going to give your egg whites enough time to really develop that volume. So medium high is a good point. In the formula, it does say add food coloring and extract at that stage. You can definitely add your food coloring at the meringue stage, but you can also add it, like in the video, you can add it at the end when you're doing your macronage. So it's totally your preference, whichever you're more comfortable with. And then you're going to fold in the almond meal and the 3 additions. Again, make sure you guys watch that video. It'll walk through all of that. So down to what Trista was talking about, using a piping bag with a round tip, 806. You want to use your 806 tip. That's going to make sure that they're not getting piped too large, and it will give you more control as you are piping. You can use parchment or a Silpat. That is also your preference. They dry out a little bit better with parchment, but you don't have to worry about sticking with Silpat. So it's definitely, again, your preference to what you want to use. A lot of times when you're making a lot of volume of macarons, you use parchment, just because could you imagine having your dishwasher wash like 40 Silpats? Oh my God, they would hate you. So parchment is easy, throw it away, get it out of the way. So here, sharply tap the sheet pan 3 or 4 times on the counter to get rid of any air bubbles. You just kind of wrap it on one side, wrap it 3-4 times on the counter, spin that sheet tray, do it again. It's so much fun. Get some stress out. I know everybody's stressing out right now, so knock some air out of those macarons. It's tons of fun. You can take a little toothpick and kind of like pop them a little bit if they didn't knock out on their own. And that's when you're gonna just go ahead and allow it to rest until that skin forms, 15 to 20 minutes. Don't get confused with step 13 and 14, because you need to tap your pan before you let it dry. They are kind of swapped. I'm sorry, I didn't write it, but they are kind of swapped. It's Gislin, the Gislin book, those guys. So just make sure that you're knocking your air out, then let it rest until you've got that nice kind of smooth surface on there. Then go into the oven. Some things to look for: they should have a nice rise, they should have a nice foot on the bottom. To test to see if they're done, just kind of nudge it with your finger. If it just like swipes over a lot, they're not done. They haven't dried out enough. If it just gives like a little, then you know that they're ready to come out. Let them rest on the pan, just let them cool there. And then you can come in and they should easily come off. Another test you could do, if that nudging, you're just not really sure, if you very carefully kind of pick one up, like just lift it up, if it's still stuck, if it's sticking to the pan, it's not done. It's not dried out enough. Remember I said, you've got to make sure that you're drying these out. That's the goal, to dry them out so that they're not still moist and sticking. Anybody have any questions for me right now? I think we've covered everything. Ooh, fillings. Fillings will be next. But any questions on the process of making your macaron shells?
If we want to paint them with like luster dust or like paint, food coloring paint, do we paint them before or after they're baked?
After. So if you're doing any painting, that will be after, once they're cooled down. Get your luster dust or get your vodka and coloring, your vodka and luster dust or shimmer, what is it, luster, what's the other one, pearl. Your pearl or your luster, whatever it is that you're using, mix it with some vodka, create your paint, and then you can come and paint on those cookies. So yeah, if you don't want to color the shells themselves, you can totally leave them plain. You can do some painting of the shells with your food coloring and vodka, like Trista's going to be doing. Filling, if you have ganache from last week, you can use your ganache for the filling. Buttercream is another, that's the traditional filling for a macaron, is buttercream. I will be posting a Swiss meringue buttercream, as well as an Italian meringue buttercream on the class page, which you will work with when you go to your BK 121 class, but I will post them here. If you're up for a challenge and you want to make some absolutely delicious, luxurious, creamy, dreamy buttercream, I'll post those on the class page for you guys. Jam is another filling. You'll make what we call a well. So you'll pipe your buttercream or your ganache kind of around the outside of your circle, and then do a little plop of jam right in the middle, and then sandwich your cookies. So that's another type of filling that you can use. So just a couple things about like if things, some typical things that go wrong with a macaron, or snafus with my little Bitmoji. I love it. I've been dying to show my Bitmoji off. my monocle. I think I'm a lot fancier than I am. So the main ones would be hollow shells. If you have hollow shells, so you're going to see inside of your cookie, there's going to be some softness, some sponginess, but right above that's going to be hollow. This always tends to be my issue because of oven temperatures. Not deflated enough, or your oven is too hot. If the oven's too hot, your cookies are going to spring up and you're going to have that little gap in there. Working with an actual thermometer in your oven is so helpful when making macarons, because that thermostat on your oven is not always accurate. Trust me. Sunken tops, they need to bake longer. If you have no feet, so if you don't have that pretty little frilly like base to it, that's what we call a foot. That probably means that your batter was too wet or it wasn't rested long enough. So if you overworked the batter, you're not really going to get a foot on there. And then if you didn't allow them to rest and like get that dry top, again, you're not really going to get good feet on there. Here's two links that I really like: Indulge with Mimi and Bake Toujours is this one. This is a YouTube channel that I enjoy, and she does a phenomenal job with macarons. She really gets into kind of troubleshooting of macarons. So check out that link there, as well as the Indulge with Mimi. There's a nice kind of like, she goes into a lot of different troubleshooting problems with macarons. So what's due this week? Week 4, we've got a conversions check and your macarons. That's it. No discussion forum, no knowledge check, just your conversion check. I do need to double check that. Is it your conversion or is it your, sorry, you do not have a conversions check. Ignore me. You have a knowledge check, not conversion. So I will change that. And both of them, of course, are due on Tuesday. All right, guys. So how are we feeling? Are we excited for macarons? I am. Any questions on this week, week 4, or week 3, if you still haven't done it yet?
What's the best food coloring to use? Like what, oil-based, water-based?
Yeah, so your gels. You're going to want to use your gels. Pretty much when you get into kind of the professional world, leave those Wilton or what are they? The McCormick's, right? The McCormick's liquid ones. We're done with those. Those are a thing of the past. So always stick with your gel colors. Oh, it is a conversions check? What? Oh, maybe I'm looking, I don't know, whatever. Do the quiz. Do your week 4 quiz. Whatever it is. Any other questions? That was a great question.
Is there like, can we use like regular paintbrushes for painting stuff on, or is there a special kind of paintbrush?
No, yeah, you can use regular ones. I like to use little guys. Obviously, you just want to make sure that it hasn't been in paint, just for edible reasons, safety, sanitation, all that good stuff. But you can just use a regular, it doesn't have to be like natural boar bristle or whatever kind of paintbrushes there are out there, but any kind of paintbrush. Oh, Parrish, I was on week 6. Oh, thanks. Well, now you know what's there for week 6. All right, everybody feeling good about macarons? No last minute questions?
How many do you want us to present?
3, please. Lucky number 3. I always like to see 3. 2 is not enough for consistency. 3 is that sweet spot. And then eat the rest. Oh, if you want to save them, if you want to, keep them or whatever, if they don't last very long, you should let them cure for 24 hours before you eat them. If you can manage that, they are their best when you allow them to just kind of, once they're sandwiched, stick them in a container and leave them alone for 24 hours. But, obviously you can eat them as soon as you make them, but you can definitely freeze your shells. They freeze very well. Put your shells in a Ziploc baggie, stick them in the freezer. You'll have them in there for a couple months. In the fridge, once you sandwich them, they will pretty much only last about like 2 to 4 days. They do have a pretty short shelf life to enjoy them at their peak. You can freeze whole sandwiches already sandwiched, or whole macarons already sandwiched, stick them in the freezer, but then you want to slack them. So you want to stick them in the fridge overnight to defrost, and then put them on the counter to come to room temperature before you enjoy. So that is how you would want to save these guys. And you will get quite a few out of them. So if you don't eat them all, which I know that I would, if you don't eat them all, that's how you would want to save them. Well, all right, guys. It has been a pleasure as always. Please reach out with any questions to me. You know my contacts, my office hours on the class page. I hope you all have a fantastic night, and I will be chatting with you later on this week.